Well, welcome to Humans of Iowa State.
Thank you for having me.
Of course, glad to have you. The way I like to start my segment is just by having my guest introduce yourself. So can you go ahead and tell me your name and your position on campus?
Absolutely. My name is Dr. Toyia Younger, and I have the privilege of serving as a Senior Vice President for Student Affairs here at Iowa State University.
Awesome. So as I mentioned before this and in our emails previously, the way I start this segment is by asking one question/prompt, if you will, and that is, tell me your story.
Ooh, how much time do we have?
As much as you want.
Very unique story. I'm originally from Flint, Michigan, and went to Michigan State University. Had an amazing time in college. I will admit to that. But when it was time to graduate, I really had no idea what I wanted to do. I was a social relations major, which is basically like sociology, but it was in the School of Public Affairs at Michigan State. And so most people in my program either moved to Washington, D.C. or went to law school, and I had no clue. And I actually started studying with some girls to take the LSAT because I just didn't have anything else to do. And then reality hit and said, your grades suck. You would never get into law school. That was stupid. And so I literally said, oh, I guess I'm going to DC. That's what everybody else was doing, right? I mean, and this is 21-year-old thought process, like February of my senior year. And so I ended up applying for an internship, which was 6 weeks in DC to work for my U.S. Senator from Michigan. And what was supposed to be a 6-week internship turned into 20 plus years in DC.
Wow.
I literally had one suitcase. I had $1,500, which was the money from my graduation party, and moved to DC on a whim, just completely on a whim. And it was exciting. It was new. I didn't realize what a bubble I had grown up in, and so when you get to Washington, D.C., where there are people from all over the world, I remember being on the Metro, which is like their subway, and hearing multiple languages being spoken and seeing all these tourists and all the places that you see, you have that flashback to your 8th grade trip to D.C.
Yes.
And now you're in a city and living there, and so it was very overwhelming, but in a good way. And so I remember after 2 weeks saying, I want to stay here. I like it here. Awesome. And so I remember calling home and my family said, that's wonderful. Get a real job because the internship was not paid.
Yes.
And so I said, okay, that's exactly what I'm going to do. And so I started applying for jobs on Capitol Hill in the area where I was working. And I was fortunate that someone in the office where I was doing my internship stepped down. So there was an entry-level vacancy available.
Awesome.
And I'll never forget this. And this is probably the best piece of advice I could ever give someone is to don't be too truthful in your interview, because I remember them asking 21-year-old me, so why are you interested in this job? And I said, well, because I want to stay in DC and I really don't have anything else to do. And so I figured it would be cool if I found a job. And yeah. And that was truly my answer. In hindsight, I'm like, I cannot believe you said that. Are you insane? And thankfully, they had some grace and was like, all right, maybe we can mold her into something, because right now this girl is a mess. But they ended up hiring me.
Awesome.
For a whopping $19,000. So, back then I thought I was rich. That was big money, right? And I'm living in the city until I went to go find a real apartment. And it was $750 a month, which is kind of the equivalent of my mom's mortgage back in Michigan. So I was like, wait, what? And so it was definitely a shock to move to such a big city that was very expensive. And so, but I loved DC. I loved everything about it. I loved the people. I loved learning new things. I actually started dating a guy and he was like, you grew up in a bubble, didn't you? And I'm like, what are you talking about? And he was like, have you had real authentic Italian food? And I said, yeah, we got an Olive Garden. What are you talking about? And he was like, yeah, I'm going to get you exposed to some things. And so for date nights, he used to take me to different restaurants. And that was the first time I had Ethiopian food. It was the first time I ever had sushi. It was the first time I had like all these new things. And I said, wow, this is amazing. And so I feel like I spent my adult years growing up in this major city that was full of opportunities. And so I worked on the Senate side for a while, and someone told me, the big money is over on the House side. You need to go work on the House of Representatives, because that's where the big money is. And I said, oh, okay. And so I started applying for jobs on the House side where I made a whopping $21,000. So I was really rich by this time, right? You couldn't tell me anything. And I worked for an amazing congressman from Minnesota who actually ended up getting appointed to the Education and Workforce Subcommittee.
Wow.
And that was kind of my entree into education. It was a wonderful time because they were talking about things that I was still passionate about and very close to. It was talking about affordability in higher education. It was talking about accessibility for all students. And I'm like, yeah, I get that. Yeah, college was expensive. We should be doing something to make college more affordable. And so I asked him if I could staff him on that committee. And that's really when I learned kind of the ins and outs of education policy and the importance of policy work in forming how colleges and universities run, and everything from financial aid process and grants and scholarships, all those types of things. And so working on the committee with him was amazing. And he said, Toyia, I really think you should consider graduate school. And I said, slow down, sir. You have not seen my transcript from undergrad. Are you kidding me? And he said, no, I really think you should consider it. And so I looked around for programs, and I found a program basically in higher education, if you will. But I was nervous. My GPA was acceptable. People graduate magna cum laude. No, I just graduated. So I wasn't quite sure I was going to make it in graduate school. And so fortunately, my saving grace was my essay.
Oh.
And I wrote an essay and just said, I'm really passionate about helping students. I knew what it was like to kind of struggle and make my way through campus or make my way through college. And I want to make it a great college experience. And this is why. And these are the things that I want to do to help students. And so I really think that it was my essay that got me in, because it surely wasn't my grades, right?
Yes.
And they accepted me. And I tell this story because I think it's so important for people to know. They accepted me provisionally. They said, we're going to give you a chance. We're going to see if you can crack it, if you can really do this. And so ironically, regardless of what my grades were in undergrad, I totally aced graduate school. And it was because I had finally found the thing I was passionate about. I was studying, I was focused on the work, and I did very, very well in graduate school. And so, interestingly enough, my first job post my master's degree was in student affairs. I was a director of student activities at a community college, and I had a ball. I loved working with students. I was an advisor to student government. I was all those things. And worked there for several years. And then someone told me, you should go back and get your PhD, to which I responded, what is this school thing you keep forcing me? Like, why does everyone keep telling me that I have to go back to school? And I'll be honest with what he said, and I think he was actually true. He said, I was the youngest director on campus. I'm a director at 26 years old with a full staff, and my last name's Younger. And it was actually the first time that I think I consciously knew that I was experiencing ageism. They would make little comments and little jokes about, oh, she's doing great things on campus, but of course she is, she's younger than everyone else. And I thought it was a play on my name, and I didn't really realize that it was kind of a dig, and there's like, she's young, she doesn't really know, And so he said, in order for you to gain some credibility on this campus, and as you move forward and advance in your career, you're going to need this extra credential. You're going to need these letters behind your name. And so I took his advice, which was a surprise, because I was like, all right, let's see if I can get in, and ended up getting into a PhD program at University of Maryland. And that just changed my life. That was really the thing that kind of jump-started my career and my research interests and my passion. And so from there, I had a variety of jobs. I've worked at 2 national higher education associations, which is not really traditional for most people in higher education, but I got a chance to travel the world and visit colleges and universities all across the country, built an amazing network of people. And all of that was wonderful. And then I realized I'm missing something. I'm missing students. And so I said, it's time for me to get back on a campus. But I was nervous because at the time I hadn't been on a campus in about 6 years. And so I said, they're going to think I'm this big policy wonk from DC and wonder what the heck is she going to tell us? How is she going to help run this campus? And so I was nervous. I was really nervous about putting myself out there, to be quite honest. And a colleague actually nominated me for a position at another university in December. And I did the interview with them, and then they flew me to campus, and I had a great visit. It was something about being on a campus. It was the energy, it was the students, it was the people. And I was like, even if I don't get this job, this is confirmation that I need to be back on a campus. And so they narrowed it down to 2 people. It was myself and another candidate. And I was like, wow, okay, this is it. And unbeknownst to me, the students, it was funny, I got a phone call from my cousin, and she said, have you been on Twitter? I'm like, been on Twitter? What are you talking about? And she said, you need to go on Twitter because your name is out there. And I'm like, wait a minute, because I had not told that many people that I had even interviewed at this university.
Yeah.
Well, unbeknownst to me, the student government and the student newspaper took out a full-page ad saying that I was their choice, that I cared about students, that I was the one they wanted. But they also, I said, I think it was those students who messed me up, and that's why I didn't get the job. Because they also said, she's not going to just stand for the status quo. She's going to come in and shake things up at this university. She's going to do all these things. And I think the administration was like, whoa, slow. We don't know if we need that kind of person or whatever. So I laughed to this day because I was like, it was those crazy students. That's why I didn't get the job. You put that whole ad in the newspaper. But ironically, they kind of outed me, to be quite honest, because I hadn't told people. And so because it was on Twitter and on social media now, several search firms started getting my name.
Oh.
And so then they started reaching out to me and said, wow, you must have had a great impact on students. While you might not have gotten that job as Vice President of Student Affairs, here's information about a couple of other jobs. Would you consider? So I'm like, well, maybe this is a good thing. Maybe this is a blessing. These jobs are coming to me now, and people are coming and looking at me. And so I was in 2 searches, and then March 2020 happened. And I was like, you've got to be kidding me. This is crazy. The timing was insane, right? And so as the world shut down, I was like, well, maybe this is a sign. Maybe I'm not supposed to move right now. Maybe I'm not supposed to go on a campus. And I laugh and I tell the story all the time because both of the searches said, we're going to wait 2 months until COVID's over, and then we're going to call you and we're going to bring you to campus. And I was like, sure, because of course COVID's going to be over by Easter. Yep. I mean, that's what we thought, right?
Of course, yeah.
And so, needless to say, 2 months came and went.
Yes.
And so by this time, I had kind of checked out. I was like, well, maybe it's just not meant to be. And I got a phone call from the search firm, and they wanted to talk to me about a position. And I said, are they serious about this? I don't have the time to be going through this. I was in 2 searches. I'm still waiting. It's been 2, 3, 4 months now. They haven't called me back. How are you going to do this? What are you going to do? And he said, no, I'm serious. And he said, and I really want you to consider this because I've done several searches at this university. I think it's a great university. I think you're really going to like it. I think it aligns with your values and your belief systems. And I was like, oh, well, this is intriguing. Tell me where it is. And he said, Iowa State University. And I said, I am not moving to Iowa. Please don't call me back.
Very valid.
So 2 days later, he calls and was like, so have you gotten your materials together yet? And I was like, what part did you not understand? I said, I'm not moving to Iowa. Are you kidding me? And so he said, no, I really, really want you to consider this. He said, I feel like I've gotten to know you. And he said, I just think this is going to be a good fit for you. And so I looked at the description and, was like, whatever. And he says, well, I want you to really consider this is on a Friday. He said, you really need to consider this because I need your materials by Monday. And I'm like, come on, guy. Like, are you kidding me? And he said, because the search committee's meeting and I want to have your name in that group. And so I said, okay. And so Sunday night, as I'm watching Real Housewives of Atlanta, I said, let me just go ahead and send this man this materials because he's going to call me tomorrow and ask me for them again. And I just really don't even want to talk to him. So I might as well just give it to him. He'll be off my back and that will be the end of it. Mm-hmm. And so I submitted my materials and he called me on Wednesday and said, congratulations, the search committee would like to meet with you. And I was like, wait, what? Hold on, sir. I just submitted my things to get you off my back. Are you serious? Mm-hmm. And he said, yes. And I said, oh. Well, let me figure out where Iowa is on the map. I knew nothing about Iowa, completely sight unseen, just, had no clue. And so I said, well, how are they going to do this? Because this is COVID, right? Mm-hmm. And he says, well, you're going to do your first round interview on Zoom. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, okay. He said, you're going to meet with the search committee for about an hour and we'll see how it goes. And so this is early Zoom. We were not Zoom professionals at the time. Yes. And so, I turn on my Zoom camera and my face is in the screen. I'm like, hello, can you hear me? It was horrible. I thought it was absolutely a mess. But we started having an amazing conversation, which ended in a discussion about what does it take to help students be successful. Mm-hmm. And as I was talking, I tell people all the time, when you interview for jobs, you're interviewing them just like they're interviewing you. Mm-hmm. And so at the end, I asked them, what is it that's so special about Iowa State? Why are you here? How long have you been here? And why have you chosen to stay? It's Iowa. And in my mind, remember, I'm living in the nation's capital with millions of people. Why on earth should I pack up and move to Iowa? Mm-hmm. And why Iowa State? And every single person on that search committee began talking about their desire to help students succeed. They started talking about their passion. They started talking about the care and concern they had for students and how they wanted students to be successful. And in my mind, I'm like, yeah, me too. Isn't that kind of cool? Yeah, And I was like, wow, I wasn't expecting that conversation. I'll put it that way. Mm-hmm. And so when I hung up, I'll be honest, I was like, ooh, I killed that. Good job, Toyia. I felt really great afterwards. Yeah. But still was kind of like, Iowa? We'll see. And so after that interview, I actually drove home to Michigan. This is COVID. We're not really traveling. So I drove. Mm-hmm. And I went home to check on my mom. And I was at home at my mom's house. And decided I was going to stay for a couple of weeks and just, hang out with her. Mm-hmm. And I got a phone call and they said, congratulations, you're a finalist. They want to interview you for 2.5 days for this position. 2.5 days. And so, yes, 2.5 days, but it gets worse. Oh, man. Because I'm in Michigan, so I'm on Google trying to figure out how far the drive is from Flint, Michigan to Ames, Iowa. And they said, oh, no. It's all on Zoom. And I said, excuse me? Like the Zoom where my face was in the camera. Are you kidding me? What are you talking about? 2.5 days on Zoom? That's insane. Yeah. And so, of course, I'm at my mother's house, who still has a home phone that rings loud throughout the entire house. Yes. This was when you kind of had your choice with basic internet and high speed. My mom had basic. And I was like, yeah, this is not going to work for 2.5 days. And so I said, Mom, I love you, but I got to go. Mm-hmm. And so I packed up the car next day and drove 9 hours back to DC so I could be in the comfort of my own home with high-speed internet to do this interview. And so I interviewed Monday, Tuesday, and a half day Wednesday. Wow. And it was probably the most grueling interview I've ever had in my life. Mm-hmm. Every hour on the hour, I had to click a different Zoom link and talk to a different group of people. So 1 minute I was talking to staff. The next hour I'd be talking to students. It was just, the next minute I'm talking to faculty. The next minute I'm talking to senior leaders. And I'm like, this is crazy. It was grueling because just like I'm talking to you and showing my personality, we're together. Yeah. So you can see my personality. Can someone really see your personality and your energy on a screen?
Definitely not.
And so I felt like I was being a little bit extra, and I am extra, let me be very clear. But I felt like I was like, I got to show my personality. I have to show my passion, And so by the time I finished the interview, I was exhausted. Yeah. I was completely exhausted. And they said, well, there's one more part of the interview. And I'm like, there is nothing else that I could possibly do for y'all people. If you don't know by now, then I just don't know. Yeah. And they said, we want you to meet with a group of students. And this is July of 2020. Oh. And I'm like, and exactly where do you think you're going to find some students in July of 2020? Everyone had been sent home after the pandemic. who's going to be around in July?
Nobody.
And they said, well, we'll have a group of students we'd like you to meet with. And I said, okay, whatever, I'll play along, right?
Yeah.
And so I'm like, when are we going to do this? And they said, Friday morning at 8:00. To which I respond, what student are you going to find in July on a Friday at 8 a.m.? Like, this is crazy. This is not even going to work. Nobody's going to show up. This is going to be stupid. But I'll play along. I was like, hey, you're asking me to do it. I've already gone this far. I'm all the way in. You might as well.
Yeah.
And so I will never forget that Friday morning. I logged on at 7:56. And I was like, it'll be 2-3 kids on here. Boom, boom, boom. No big deal. And I logged on, and there were 26 students on there.
Wow.
And some of them were dressed. They had on suits and ties. I was like, oh, whoa. Okay, wait a minute. Like, this was not what I was expecting. And I'll never forget, the one young man was actually president of the student body, and he had on his suit and tie. And he was like, well, Dr. Younger, we are prepared to ask you a series of questions. And I was like, oh, wait a minute, they're serious. Like, this is for real. I was totally caught off guard. But I think that's one of the things I love about Iowa State is that the students are passionate about this work, and they really took this search very seriously. And so I said, well, before we get started, I actually have a question for you all, if you don't mind. And they said, sure, what's the question? And I said, how are you doing? I said, you went away for spring break, you came back, and then we told you to pack up and leave. Mm-hmm. You had to immediately, whether you had done it before or not, had to try and learn online. Some people went home. Some people didn't have homes to go to. Mm-hmm. Some people don't have the best relationships with their family. Some people hate the dog. They can't stand their little sister. All sorts of things are happening. Mm-hmm. How are you doing? This has been a lot for you. Are you okay? And this one young lady comes off of mute, and she begins crying. And she says, no one has ever asked us that before. And so what was supposed to be an interview with students turned into group therapy. and I'm in tears. People are sharing their stories, and we're like, I'm struggling. Like, I've never had to learn online before. My grades are suffering. I'm so worried about what my GPA is going to be. I don't know. People said, I'm so scared to come back in the fall. What happens if we come back and everybody gets COVID? Mm-hmm. I don't know if I want to live in the residence hall. I mean, we had really deep, meaningful conversations with the students. And so it took up all the time. And I kind of laughed because I was like, they didn't get a chance to ask me any questions. And so when I logged off with the students, I remember sitting there thinking, and I was like, once again, and it was the same feeling that I had when I interviewed at the other institution. I was like, Toyia, it's time for you to be back on a campus. Mm-hmm. There's work that needs to be done on a campus, and you need to be back on a campus. And so I called the search firm that afternoon and said, hey, so what's next? And they said, I'll be honest, we don't know. We've never done this 2-3 day Zoom interview before. We have no idea what the next steps are. Mm-hmm. And they said, well, we know they're going to move quickly, so you should be waiting for a phone call from them. And, they said they may invite you to campus. And I said, well, that'd be nice because I've never been to Iowa. But they said, I know people are nervous about traveling. It's still the pandemic. And so, they were like, we really don't know. Like, no one really had answers because no one had ever done this extensive Zoom interview before, right? Yeah. And so I slept that whole weekend because I was completely exhausted after that grueling interview,
Understandable.
Right? And so on Monday, I was waiting, and I said, they're not going to call. They got to talk. They got to talk amongst themselves. They got to debrief on my interview. I'm not going to hear from them today. It's okay. Mm-hmm. And then I woke up on Tuesday and was like, they better hurry up and call me. I feel like I was great, and I just don't understand what is taking them so long to see my greatness. Like, what is going on here, And so I'll never forget that afternoon, President Winterstein's assistant called me. Oh. And she says, Dr. Younger, I'm so sorry for the short notice. President Winterstein wants to talk to you. We can do it this afternoon at 3:30, but I know it's kind of last minute, so if you aren't available to do it now, we can do it tomorrow. Mm-hmm. And I was like, no, we're going to do that today. Because I am not going to be up all night long wondering what President Winterstein wants to talk to me about.
Yes.
So I canceled all my meetings for the rest of the day and was like, all right, let's do this. And so I get on Zoom with her, and I have no idea what the conversation is. I thought she was going to invite me to campus. I really did. That's what I thought the conversation was going to be. And she pulls out this notebook. And she begins telling me about the feedback that she's heard from I actually also had to do a recorded presentation. So she starts telling me some of the things and the quotes that I said from the presentation. I was like, oh, wait, she watched the presentation. Like, whoa, wait a minute. She's like really into this. And I mean, and she went on and on about things that people said and the different groups that I met with. And I was like, wow, she's taking this really seriously. Like, this is really an important position. And so she started going on and on for a while, and I'm like, okay, look, lady, what is this? What are we doing here? What cut to the chase. What is this going to be about, right? And she says, I know it's going to be a lot for you to consider leaving DC. She said, but I'm actually calling to make you an offer, and we would love to have you. Wow. And she said, people said so many wonderful things about you, but I think you need to know what the students said. And I was kind of like, uh-oh. The student said, we didn't get a word in edgewise. She talked too much, And the student said, we need her. She cares about us. It was very obvious that she truly cares. She wants us to succeed. And that's the type of person that we want in this position. And so that sealed the deal for me. It really did. And so I was trying to be all big and bad. I was actually in tears almost at this time. And so I said, well, I'm going to need some time to think about this. You'll have to give me a little bit of time. And she says, well, if you have any questions, here's my cell phone number. Call me. Wow. You are our choice. And I said, okay. And so I tease because I say I hit that button that we all love so much. Leave meeting.
Yes. Good button.
And as soon as I hit that button, I start crying. And I said, wow, I'm moving to Iowa. And the rest is history. And so 3.5 weeks later, I had packed up my entire life and moved here. But when did I move here? 3 days before the Durate show. You can't make this stuff up, right?
Wow.
And so I'm already moving to a place completely sight unseen.
Yeah.
I get here and they have this freakish storm that nobody had ever heard of before, right? I was moving into my apartment. The electricity went out for 3 days. And so I tell people I just sat in the dark contemplating my life choices. I sat there like, I wonder how much it would be for me to call the movers and have them move me back to DC because this is insane. Like, I mean, and I remember President Winterstein called me that day. And she said, hi, Toyia, I just want to check on you and see how you're doing. And I'm like, I'm okay, as I'm sitting in the dark. And I said, what happened? And she said, well, we don't know. We are learning, just like we're learning information just like everyone else. But it was interesting because, and I tell the story because it's true, in that moment, while I hadn't even officially started work, I was like, I got to figure out what's going on. I've got to step into gear, and kind of put my own orientation to the side. I've got to be part of this. And I had already had a few conversations with Aaron Baldwin, who was the interim senior vice president at that time. And ironically, students were moving in. The day of the Durate show, some students were moving into the residence halls. They were doing COVID testing in Lead. It was a lot happening. And so in my mind, I'm like, I mean, technically I'm really not on payroll yet. But conversely, I was like, this is major. Yeah. And I feel like I need to get up to speed. I need to figure out where these facilities are, what's going on. And so I felt like I was kind of thrust into the work. And now I laugh. I said, I could only go up. I mean, it was a Durate show. It was COVID. It was like I started at rock bottom. There was nothing else that could have potentially happened. But I'm grateful because I came in at a time where there was a lot happening. And so the leadership team, my student affairs leadership team, we were great. We laughed to this day because we said, they were saying, we were nervous about a new senior vice president coming in. And I was like, and none of that mattered because we didn't have time to figure out whether you liked me or not, right? We had work to do. Yeah. We had to figure out what we were going to do to support our students during this global pandemic, during this massive storm that had knocked out power and done serious destruction throughout the state. It didn't matter if we liked each other. We had to come together and do what was necessary. And so, it was an interesting time to move here. And I cannot believe that I'm now coming around the corner on almost 5 years of being here. It has been an amazing journey, an amazing opportunity. I've met some great people. I've been blessed with a fantastic staff. And so it has been a wonderful experience for me. being back on campus, connecting with students in the way that I do. If you can't tell, I am extreme extrovert. And so I love being around people. I thrive on that. The connections and the relationships that I built with not only my staff, but particularly the students is what has filled my cup. And so even on the rough days, and there are some, there's a lot of challenging things that always happen. There's always something that's going on. But I think about the faces when I meet with students, when I talk to them, when I get invitations, far too many that I can't say yes to all of them, and I'm like, I don't even know this group. Why are they? And they're like, Dr. Younger, we heard you speak at such and such, and we wanted to invite you to our event. And I have this weird relationship with the word no. and so when the asks come, and especially if it's students, now if it's faculty or staff, I might tell them that. No, I'm joking. But when the students ask, I want to be there for them. I want to see them succeed. I want to see their program be successful. I want to be there to support them for the event. And so it has been a journey for sure. And there is no one day that is the same. People ask me all the time, what do you do? Give us a normal day. There is nothing normal about my job or my day, and I come in every morning with all intentions of the meetings, and I have a assistant who writes out my schedule, and I'm supposed to do this. And by 10 o'clock, somebody's throwing rocks off of the, roof at Carver, somebody's smoking in rec services. I mean, you just never know what's going to happen. So there's no traditional day. And I think that's the thing that I like. I kind of thrive on the and I don't even want to say uncertainty. It's probably more so the spontaneity. There's something that's always going to happen and you never know. And so I've enjoyed the time here. I've enjoyed the people that I've met. A lot of the faculty and staff have confirmed exactly what that search committee told me, that they're here for the students. I've been at different institutions. I've been at places all over the country. And the care and concern that I see our faculty and staff give to students is just unmeasurable. There is a genuineness about wanting to see students succeed. And of course, I would want to be in a place that does just that.
Wow, that was an amazing life story, definitely really inspirational, and I know so many of our students are going to watch this and just see you in such an appreciative light. We're so happy to have you on campus. Thank you for coming in today.
Thank you.
So, as I mentioned earlier, I have a couple more questions for you that just kind of follow up on your story. It'll be kind of a rapid fire style, if you will. And my first question that I have for you is, what is it like to be a woman holding a leadership position at a large university?
I think it's unique. I did not find out until a little bit after I got here that I was actually the first woman in this particular senior vice president role. Really? And so I kind of wonder if my approach is maybe no shade. Let me be very clear, no shade. But I think it's just a different approach. I think there might be a more sensitivity to students' needs, a more caring and concern. I have to catch myself. I don't have children, but sometimes when people, especially the guy that you really don't want to date, comes up to you and he asks if you have kids, I say, yeah, I have 30,432.
Yes, you do.
But I genuinely value the students, and I think that my approach is probably different because I am a woman. And so there's this kind of borderline motherly instinct that I think kicks in, the level of care that I want to provide. I want to see everyone succeed. When I see a student struggling, I want to help them. And so I think it just gives me a different perspective. Both of my predecessors did amazing work here, but I think it's just different. My approach is different. I'll never forget when I first got here, I met with every member of my cabinet. Oh, wow. And remember, this is during COVID. So I didn't even meet my staff face to face till almost March of 2021. Wow. But I still set up individual meetings with each one. And I said, what do you want to be when you grow up? And how can I help you get there? And they were like, wow. We've never had a boss ask us that. That's interesting, And I think I express not a greater or less. It's a different level of care, and I think that's kind of motherly instinct maybe that I carry with me. And so I'm genuinely concerned. I have this concern about what's happening on campus. If you looked at my favorites, you'd probably laugh at my phone. It's my mother, my sister, President Winterstein, Chief Newton, the dean of students. I want to know what's happening on the campus. I genuinely want to make sure that everything's okay, that our students are safe, that things aren't happening. And if there's something that I need to tend to, I want to know about it. And so I think that I just bring a different level of care, a different approach to dealing with students. And that may be because I'm a woman. I'm not quite sure. I don't know, but I think I definitely bring a unique perspectives that perhaps my predecessors didn't.
Absolutely. And we are so grateful for the concern that you have for students. We can really feel the love and appreciation you have for all of us. So thank you.
Oh, you're welcome.
So back into rapid fire questions. My next
Sure.
question that I have for you is, what is one piece of advice that you have for young women looking to be in a leadership position like yours?
I'd probably say to be their authentic self. I think when I started in my career, I was trying to be what people said I was supposed to be, and it wasn't who I was, and I struggled with that. I felt like it was very fake, that I was, you're supposed to carry yourself in a certain way, or you're supposed to, you can't use those words, or you can't talk that way, you sure can't dress that way. And one of the things that I think that I appreciate the most is when people come to me and they say, the one thing that I really like about you is that you're so authentic. I feel like you're, the conversation that I'm having with you even right now is exactly the same way that I talk to custodians. It's exactly the same way I talk to President Winterstein. What you see is what you get. And I think that people value the authenticity. They don't want someone who sounds rehearsed or everything has this, there's an air about them and they're putting on this front or this facade. I never want to do that. I want people to trust me. And I think the best way to do that is to be my authentic self. And sometimes I've stepped in it and said some things and I was like, well, yeah, that was your authentic self, wasn't it? But I think it's so important. I think it's an important trait to have in leadership.
Absolutely. My next question I have for you is pretty simple. What is your favorite Iowa State memory?
Oh my gosh. I think that there's been a lot. I've been so fortunate. I'm a huge sports fan. So, you name it, Pop-Tart Bowl, all sorts of, Hilton Magic, all the things. But I think that my favorite memory, and I think it's probably because it had the most impact on me, both personally and professionally, was when I was able to chair the Jack Trice 100 commemoration back in 2023. That was the 100th anniversary of his death. And I kind of had a vision of what I wanted to do and wasn't quite sure if I would be able to pull it off. And so working with a library and certain archives, I found a picture of Jack Trice's funeral. And there was a casket right in the middle of Central Campus, and there were hundreds of students and faculty all sitting on the ground, participating and watching his funeral. And so, as a commemoration for that, I decided that I wanted to recreate that moment. And so, our closing ceremony for the Jack Trice 100 commemoration ended up being a ceremony right there on Central Campus. And hundreds of people showed up. The entire football team was there. We had worked hard to do something special, and so we were able to present Jack Trice's family with a posthumous degree. It was a lot. It was I didn't expect to be so emotional behind it, but when you think about the amazing story of Jack Trice being the first African-American athlete on this campus during a time when our country was so divided and segregated, just the very fact that we had a black athlete in 1923 was amazing in and of itself. And so to be able to honor his memory, honor his family and the legacy, and to be a part of a special commemoration was just priceless. And so as I wanted as many people as possible, and you never know when you have events on campus, you don't know who's going to show up.
Yes.
And as we had begun the program, and I'm sitting there, and the Gospel Jubilee Choir is singing, and administrators are there, and I look up out of the corner of my eye, and I see Coach Campbell and the entire ISU football team walking in. and I lost it. I just absolutely lost it. And it was just probably a very powerful moment for many of us who were there. You could almost feel the spirit of Jack Trice, you know. But on a personal note, it just meant a lot to me, you know, to be standing there, to be celebrating the life and the legacy of our first African-American student athlete here at Iowa State. Mm-hmm. And who would have thought that 100 years later, you'd have a Black woman serving in a capacity in leadership at that same institution. I think that was just a very powerful moment for me, and that's something I will always treasure and remember.
Wow, that is a very powerful moment. Thank you for sharing that. I'm sure that's going to give many people goosebumps, including myself. So thank you for sharing. I only have 2 questions left for you, and they are pretty quick.
Sure.
I usually ask all of my guests what if they feel welcome at Iowa State, mm-hmm. but due to your leadership position, I figured I would change it up. How do you ensure that your students feel welcome at Iowa State?
You know, I think that there's a place for everyone at Iowa State. Mm-hmm. You know, when I talk to people outside of the university and I talk about the fact that we have over 800 clubs and organizations, they're like, what? Like, how are you managing that? And I said, because I think there's something here for everyone. Mm-hmm. You know, I think that one of the things we really try to emphasize is how can students build community? Mm-hmm. And community looks different for students. And it may be joining an academic club or being connected with their major. It may be joining a science club or just a fun organization that they want to be a part of. And so I think that as I talk to students who have conversations with me about feeling welcomed on campus or feeling like they belong here, many of them talk about the community that they built. And I think that's so important. I think we create opportunities to build community. Mm-hmm. And even for those people who feel like, well, I don't know, this university is so big, I think that we create these smaller communities that help people fit in. Mm-hmm. And I think once you fit, when you have that connection, and sometimes the connections are academic, sometimes it's with faculty who are, they're leading projects or special research things in the classroom, mm-hmm. or for others, it's outside of the classroom. Mm-hmm. But either way, I think that those different experiences help build community and help people feel welcomed here at Iowa State.
Definitely. My last question I have for you is the most simple out of all of them. Do you have anything else that you would like to share before we wrap things up? Any shout outs you would like to give? Anything else you think we might have forgotten? I think my biggest shout out are to the students. That's what brings me here. You know, being in senior leadership, as you can imagine, I feel like I have a million meetings a week. I'm sure.
And, and students always tend to ask me when I'm at events or whatever, oh, thank you for coming. And, what's the best part of your day, or what's the part that you love the most? And I tell them this, even sitting here talking to you, it's probably been the best thing that I've done today.
Thank you.
I have been in back-to-back meetings. I have been on Zoom calls talking about some good and some not so good things. Mm-hmm. But when I have the opportunity to connect with students, that's what fills my cup. It allows me to kind of reconnect with who I am and why I do this work. Mm-hmm. And so it's a shout out to the students. It's a shout out to the community that they create. It's a shout out to what they do to help make Iowa State University the great place that it is. Mm-hmm. And, are we perfect? Absolutely not. And I've told people, even when I came to Iowa State, if it was perfect, you wouldn't need me here. I wouldn't have a job to do. If everything was perfect and everything was wonderful, I wouldn't be here. Exactly. And so I'm here to continue the work. I'm here and totally committed to doing what I believe is necessary to help students succeed. And so I'm just grateful for the opportunity to serve in this role.